Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something that, well, it might seem incredibly mundane at first, something you probably do every single day without even thinking about it.
Right.
The simple act of counting. Counting your steps, your change, maybe the days till payday. It's just part of life, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And yet, throughout history, and actually across a whole bunch of different cultures, this very normal act, counting, has often been seen as something, well, sinful or even dangerous.
Yeah.
It's quite the paradox when you think about it.
Exactly. And that's the intriguing idea we're really going to get into today. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the fascinating and sometimes surprising reasons behind this ancient taboo. We'll start with some ancient biblical texts, looking at where this idea of the census sort of pops up, and then we'll broaden things out, looking at folklore and superstitions from all over the world.
Yeah. We pulled together insights from religious scholarship, but also anthropological observations from the source materials. It's a journey that really shines a light on a deep-seated human anxiety, I think, about quantifying things, putting a number on stuff, especially living beings.
Okay, so let's tackle that paradox head on. The Bible. It seems to hold this core idea that counting is bad, the sin of a census, but then it also commands it. How does that even work?
It's a great question. And honestly, it's a contradiction that scholars have grappled with for, well, centuries. If you look at ancient Jewish texts, like the Babylon Talmud, specifically 𝗂𝗏 22b, there's this powerful belief.
Okay.
It quotes Rabbi Nahman ben Isaac, who references the prophet Hosea, saying something like, the number of the people of Israel shall be like the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured or counted.
Like the sand, uncountable.
Exactly. So the understanding developed that if you counted a Jew directly, person by person, you were actually committing a fault. The idea being the people of Israel are meant to be limitless, like those grains of sand, immeasurable. Trying to number them was almost an act of hubris, like trying to define something God intended to be infinite.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense for why not to count. But then you flip over to 𝗵𝗶𝘀, the book of Numbers, fittingly enough, chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. And there it is, a direct command from God to Moses. Raise the heads of all the community of the children of Israel by the number of names, every male by skull. So you've got this clear tension. Don't count, but do count. How did the ancient scholars try to, square that circle?
Right, and this is where you see some really ingenious interpretation come into play. Rashi, for instance, a huge foundational commentator, he offers a classic explanation.
Okay, what did Rashi say?
He basically argued that the counting God commanded wasn't a direct head count, it was indirect. It was done by collecting a specific tax, a half shekel per head, which is mentioned back in Exodus.
The half shekel.
Exactly. And that coin was called a ransom to the Lord for his life, specifically intended to stop a plague from hitting the people when they were numbered. So in Rashi's view, when the text says by skull, it doesn't mean a literal head. It means the half shekel coin representing that person. You count the coins, not the people.
That is pretty clever. An indirect count fulfilling a direct command. But I'm guessing with texts this important, that wasn't the only way people saw it. Were there differing views?
Oh, absolutely. You're right. 𝗵𝗶𝘀, another major commentator, though from a later period, he actually disagreed quite strongly with Rashi on this.
Really? How so?
For 𝗵𝗶𝘀, collecting those shekels was purely about funding the construction of the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary. It had nothing to do with avoiding a direct count. His point was, if God explicitly commands you to count people directly, then doing it simply cannot cause harm. To think otherwise would mean God's own command could be dangerous, and for 𝗵𝗶𝘀, that just wasn't logical. So, yeah, you have these two giants of interpretation looking at the exact same text and coming to pretty different conclusions. It's fascinating.
It really is. So we have these scholarly debates, but then there's this incredibly vivid story, a really tragic one, that seems to hammer home the dangers of counting directly. King David's census. Can you walk us through that?
Certainly. That narrative, you find it in the second book of Samuel, chapter 24, is probably the most famous and stark example in the Bible. King David orders a direct count of the people.
Just counts them up.
Just counts them up. And the text is clear. The consequences were immediate and disastrous. Right after David himself realizes, I have sinned greatly, and he begs God for forgiveness. He knew instinctively almost that he'd crossed a line.
And the fallout was severe, wasn't it? Didn't the prophet Gad give him some terrible choices?
That's right. Gad presents him with three options, all awful. 7 years of famine, 3 months of fleeing from his enemies, or 3 days of pestilence, a plague in the land.
Horrible choices.
Terrible. David, in his anguish, says he'd rather fall into God's hands than human hands, trusting God's mercy. so he chooses the plague. And a devastating epidemic sweeps through Israel, killing thousands. It's just such a stark, explicit link between the act of counting and terrible consequences.
Wow. So how did this story and the underlying prohibition actually shape Jewish law, the Halakha?
It had a profound impact. Maimonides, one of the most influential legal scholars ever, lays it out very clearly in his code, the Mishnah Torah. He states flat out, it is forbidden to count Israel unless it is done through something else.
Through something else, like the shekels or...
Exactly. Or he even references an instance where Saul counted soldiers using sheep. And crucially, Maimonides says this prohibition applies even if you're counting for a mitzvah, a good deed or commandment, like counting for a minyan.
A minyan, right, the 10 people needed for communal prayer.
Yes, the quorum of 10 men. Even for something that important, you cannot just count heads. 1, 2, 3. The principle stands, direct counting of people is forbidden.
That's really powerful. But, okay, practically speaking, how does that work today? If you need 10 people for prayers, how do you know you have enough without actually, well, counting them? Sounds like you'd need a workaround.
And they have one. It's actually a brilliant example of tradition meeting ingenuity. Orthodox Jews today have this very clever practice.
Right, okay.
Instead of pointing and counting 1, 2, 3 to see if they have 10 men for a minyan, they recite a specific 10-word verse from Psalm 28.
A 10-word verse.
Yep. Psalm 28, verse 9. Hoshayat et amecha uverek et nakalateka 𝗂𝗶𝗃𝗏 ad haolam. In English, that's salvation to your people and blessings to your inheritance. Save your people, bless your possession, feed them, support them forever. Each person present says one word of the verse in sequence.
Ah, so if they finish the verse...
They know they have at least 10 people. They've effectively counted using the words, not the individuals. It neatly honors the ancient prohibition while fulfilling the practical need. It's quite elegant, really.
That really is fascinating. A beautiful way to keep tradition alive with smart solutions. But let's broaden out now. Is this fear of counting just a biblical thing, or do we see similar anxieties elsewhere in the world?
Oh, it's definitely not just biblical. This is where it gets, I think, even more intriguing. This taboo against counting is actually a remarkably widespread phenomenon. You find it in so many diverse cultures, and it applies not just to people, but often to animals like livestock or even valuable goods.
Really?
Yeah, the common thread seems to be this underlying belief that putting a precise number on something, especially something living or abundant, somehow attracts bad luck or makes it vulnerable. There's that old French saying, right? Sheep counted, the wolf eats them. It captures that feeling perfectly.
Sheep counted, the wolf eats them. That's vivid. Sir James George Frazer, in his big work, Folklore in the Old Testament, collected tons of examples of this, didn't he? Some of them are really specific and, frankly, quite curious.
He did. His work is a goldmine for this stuff.
Like, apparently in Bavaria, people used to believe that if you counted your money, it would actually decrease, literally shrink your wealth just by counting it.
Right. Or the Danish had similar fears about farming. They thought if you counted the eggs under a brooding hen, she'd end up crushing them, as if your counting interfered with the natural process.
It's like the act of observation or quantification changes the outcome.
Exactly. And that idea pops up in stranger places, too. The Danish also thought counting pests like mice or lice would make them increase.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, not what you want. And similarly, Greeks and Armenians had superstitions about counting warts, apparently. That makes them multiply, too. It suggests this fear that quantifying can somehow amplify the thing being measured, for good or bad.
And the beliefs around counting actual people or livestock seem particularly strong, almost universal. You mentioned the Lapps.
Yes, the Sami people. Traditionally, they refused to count themselves or their reindeer herds. The fear was it would directly lead to higher mortality rates. So you just didn't put a number on the living population.
And the Maasai in Africa have something similar.
And very similar. When talking about their people or cattle who are alive, they'd often use rounded, imprecise numbers. Precise counting was reserved for the dead.
Why only the dead?
The logic, apparently, was that counting couldn't cause them to die a second time. They were already gone, so the danger associated with quantification no longer applied. It's a grim kind of pragmatism, isn't it?
It really is. And the 𝗂𝗂𝗍, also known historically as Hottentots, they saw counting people in a group as a terrible omen, believing someone in that counted group would die.
Precisely. A direct link between counting and death. And then there's that fascinating belief from the Venezuelans in Caracas about group photos. It's slightly different, but related.
Right, tell us about that one.
They traditionally avoided group portraits. The belief wasn't that the photo itself caused harm directly. Rather, it was the idea that the photo becomes a sort of fixed record. Later on, as people in the photo inevitably pass away over time,
yeah.
the photo becomes a visual, unsettling way to count who is missing, who has died. Looking at the photo becomes an inadvertent tally of the deceased members of that original group. And that future counting, that reminder of loss embedded in the picture, was what they believed brought bad luck or sorrow to the remaining members. It's the future count of the absent that holds the dread.
That's a really subtle but powerful twist on the counting taboo. Wow.
And you see similar ideas about prosperity, like with the Galas in East African people. They believed counting their cattle would bring bad luck and stop the herds from multiplying. So avoiding a census was seen as crucial for their wealth and survival.
So when you pull all these examples together, from ancient laws in the Bible to these diverse global superstitions, what's the common denominator? What's the big picture here?
Well, the common thread really seems to be this fundamental human intuition, or maybe anxiety, that directly numbering things, especially living beings or things you value, somehow makes them vulnerable. It attracts misfortune, maybe invites scrutiny from unseen forces, or diminishes the very essence of what's being counted.
Yeah.
It raises a pretty deep question for us, I think.
Which is?
What is this widespread taboo really telling us about our human relationship with the world, about our sense of control, or maybe lack of control, over life, death, and prosperity?
It's definitely more than just simple superstition, isn't it? Our whole deep dive today, looking at biblical rules, folklore from around the globe, even how people adapt these ideas today. It points to this really profound, almost universal human caution about the simple act of counting, especially when it comes to life itself. There's a sense of vulnerability, maybe, or tempting fate.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our world today, which is so incredibly data-driven, I mean, we quantify everything. Steps, likes, followers, populations, GDP, you name it.
Right, we count constantly.
Are we maybe unconsciously bumping up against some of these very ancient anxieties? Could there be subtle, maybe unseen consequences to all our modern censuses and constant measurements that we haven't fully grasped yet? Perhaps consequences our ancestors understood more instinctively.
That is a really provocative thought to end on. Something definitely to think about next time you're looking at a spreadsheet or, your fitness tracker. For those of you listening who want to explore this even more, we strongly recommend Sir James George Fraser's classic Folklore in the Old Testament, specifically Tome 3, Chapter 9, on the sin of a census.
And also 𝗵𝗶𝘀𝗁𝗶𝘀𝗁 studies in 𝗵𝗶𝘃𝗀𝗃, Chapter 2, which looks closely at the forbidden and permitted census within the biblical context. Both are excellent resources.
Great recommendations. Well, until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and maybe, just maybe, think twice before you count those chickens before they hatch.